Okay, let's get started. Let's make sure we're all in the right Zoom webinar. So this is the Marketing Cloud, and tonight's talk will be on the B2C Solution Architect exam. If there's a demand for the B2B one, we have people who have passed that as well. But let's get started on tonight's session. So to kick off, I'm Jimson Lee. I'm a director at Cloud Analysts. I do all the Marketing Cloud, Data Cloud, CDP, Datorama, a suite of products from Salesforce. And Carrie, introduce yourself.
Yeah, so Carrie Townsend, been in and around the ecosystem for well over a decade, probably quite a bit longer than that. Mainly work on Marketing Cloud and Sales Cloud, and a combination of the two as a freelance consultant.
Excellent. And let me click here. So quick agenda today, straight to the point, a few announcements, and then we get right into the B2C Solution Architect exam, and then we'll wrap up with questions, and we will close by 7 or 7:15. We'll take as long as we need. Okay, so a couple of quick announcements, name changes again, as you know. Marketing Cloud, as we know it, the core product, Email Studio and Journey Builder, they're always calling it engagement now, if you've seen the documentation. So as you know, MCI, the intelligence, is Datorama. MCP, personalization, is Interaction Studio. We all know Pardot, the account engagement, and Marketing Cloud. I just put MC Hammer there just to make sure people are paying attention to the name change. It would have been good for April 1st if we had that, but that didn't happen. Okay, so just a friendly reminder, this session is being recorded. And what's also important on our YouTube channel is the one we did in June of last year. And that's where we talked about certifications and accreditations with Marketing Cloud and their products. You can watch the recording here on our YouTube channel. And again, one last thing about name changes. For those who did pass the CDP exam last year or this year, that's being changed to Data Cloud. But don't worry, you don't have to rewrite the exam. It's just a name change. And just watch your emails, and they'll tell you how to upgrade it. Like Salesforce, these exams or these accreditations only last 2 years. And then you don't lose the certification. You have to do an update exam. You don't have to redo it like Cisco exams or Google exams. So there will be an update exam for all the accreditations. So watch this space for that one. And then this book, I don't know those who know Mike King from Slalom. He wrote a book, I believe it's in the 2nd edition. This book is actually interesting, and it's kind of relevant to tonight's talk. So I'll let Doug Innes or Michael suggest the book, chapter, strategy for that. But we'll get more to that a bit later. Carrie, you'd like to just do the last?
So we signpost some of the meetings from our fellow groups in London. So the Pardot group is meeting next week, and they're looking at revenue ops. London devs actually met this week, so they met on Wednesday, I think, this week. So they haven't actually scheduled their specific date, but the next one of those will be in May. Admins is actually tonight. So we have a bit of a clash there. And then there's a Women in Tech meeting scheduled for the 30th of May. And then the London Architects are meeting on the 26th. And that's very much about data for them, is the focus topic for their session coming up this month.
Okay. And June will be really busy, as we all know.
Yep. Oh, and Ines, were you saying, like, so the data tribe are meeting on the 9th? Is that the 9th of May?
Yeah, the next
Lovely.
time. Yeah, almost there, within 4 days.
Yeah, just minutes of being able to announce that officially. Yeah, we definitely know that that feeling. So yes, no, thank you for that. We'll get those also on the slide. And then it wouldn't be a session unless I'm doing some sort of plug for London Schooling. So that's on the 9th. You'll find now that the agenda has been published, and there are marketing technology and automation talks on there. So we'll have at least 8 on the track, along with other sessions that also touch on the core clouds and also some of the industry-led clouds. So tickets are still available if you're interested in that. Again, every year, I'd love to see more and more marketing cloud people. We have some marketing cloud specific sort of sponsors or ISV partners that are more aligned to marketing and consultancies. So every year there's more and more content that is relevant to this particular group.
Okay, so that's it for the announcements, short and sweet. And I think a lot of us here today are here to learn more about the B2C Solution Architect certification, not accreditation. And I just took this. This is not mine. I have not done it yet, but I decided to use a bit of Photoshop and put your name here. And this, this is what drew the draw on LinkedIn. So let's get started. So before we go to our three panelists, I just want 3 quick slides on this topic. I'll get there in a second. First of all, this is not the B2B one, so just be careful. This is not the session for that. If there's a demand, let us know. The second slide is that this is all on the other slide. The CTA track, the Certified Technical Architect track, is out there. I think everyone in Salesforce knows about this, and this is the slide they use to show the hierarchy of prerequisites, and this is going to be important a bit later. And the other slide is how the prerequisites, again, for this exam and what it takes. This is all on the other slide that we covered back in June. So let's begin with our panelists. So I will start with, I guess, my left or your right. Start with Doug. So Doug is with Accenture, and he's the Marketing Cloud, Experience Cloud, and Commerce Cloud practice lead. Hi, Doug. Welcome, and maybe a few quick words on yourself.
Yeah, I'm living here in Amsterdam. I'm actually from New Zealand. I have the pleasure of not being a bunch of time zones away, like I can see Bill here is. We've been here with Accenture now for around 8 years, previously in Germany, and now here. My focus is indeed in the marketing cloud space. It's where I have my heart, but I now work a lot of the time across various different parts of the Salesforce architecture. Really, where marketing cloud meets other things is usually where I'm involved.
Excellent, thank you. Next on our panelists, we have INES GARCIA. She's got a long bio here. So she's also an author, speaker, circular economy, agile coach, climate change coach, carbon accounting, Salesforce MVP Hall of Fame. And she's also a freelance, and she's also had many books. Welcome, INES. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you. Yeah, don't make it easy, right? It's good to have a broad spectrum of things. I find I'm a generalist and I like it. Related to marketing, I suppose, I actually study communication. Like I have a double degree in marketing, advertisement, PR, and stuff like that. And over the years, once I got into the Salesforce world, sort of I was drawn to that. So yeah, I have some certs around marketing cloud and part of them. You know, sometimes I go into projects to find the technicality to unroll the spaghetti situation and then work through across different clouds, architecture, and even as an agile coach across departments just to make things easier.
Great, thank you. And you're also fluent in many languages. So 2, 3, at least 2 for sure. I know 2, but maybe 3. Okay, and our third panelist is Michiel Van Gaalen. He's a Salesforce application architect and marketing cloud consultant. Welcome, Michiel.
Sure.
Thanks. Good to be here. Yeah, my Salesforce background is started in 2000 when we were one of the first customers in the Netherlands, I think, to work with the platform. But I didn't really start to work until I think 7 years ago. I started with marketing clouds, but fell in love with the platform later. And I have an online marketing background, so I need both to do the fun stuff. And I'm with Doug, also a marketing cloud group leader in the Netherlands. And I want to make a statement up front because you're talking about CTA. I think I had a hard time getting the B2C solution architect exam. I think it trumps the CTA part.
Well, challenging. Okay, so let's get started here. So I think the first thing, I didn't get any questions ahead of time. There were a lot of questions last time from last June, but there weren't any questions here. So maybe should I just jump to a slide? And the first question is, how do you prepare? Let's start with Doug first. How do you prepare for this exam, starting with the prerequisite cert that you need?
Yeah, so I think maybe the first one is actually the prerequisites have been updated. So I think that happened a couple of weeks ago, maybe a couple of months ago now. And the marketing cloud has been removed from a requirement. I think that's an interesting update for everyone here. I think that's certainly for me, it is still a key part of the exam without doubt. But I think it also was one of those barriers that for a lot of people was very difficult to overcome, right? If you're coming from the core world, there's often a large barrier to pick up for Marketing Cloud. I'm a bit surprised by it, if I'm honest. And I was one of the big defenders of having that as part of the requirements, but certainly it has been updated. So when it comes to getting ready for things, I mean, I also had this conversation because I was involved a lot in actually the exam when it was initially set up. So I was part of the team that was working on trying to develop this. And I think one of the key things that we were talking about when we were doing that was really around, this shouldn't be something someone should be able to study for, and that's enough. Right. Certainly the exam and having a background, the prerequisite certifications is definitely something that's going to help you. It's going to get you in the right mindset, ready for this. But I think experience is literally the only way that you're going to cover it. But you're lucky in the sense that there's kind of a core component, there's a B2C component, there's a Marketing Cloud component. So it's not necessary that you have experience in all three of those on real project life. But if you've got kind of two of those, you should be generally good with being able to get there. But having that experience and understanding, where is, your main contact, where is the central person of who is the contact is really a core component of this. And I think if you've been doing those implementations, you should be able to cover that and should be able to know a lot of the limitations around the products that are there.
Oh, excellent. So, so the question was, is the email specialist exam still required?
No, so it's an update. I just want to check that because I did see it written on one of the Slack channels, but I just updated the exam guide there. So it's a couple of weeks or months ago that changed actually.
I looked at it this afternoon. I didn't see it.
Okay, I'm just going to check. Okay, Ines, your thoughts on the prerequisites now that email studio is not required?
Yeah, well, so my story with the subject is that I had back on the days all the prerequisites, and I thought, well, I think it's a good idea. I'm just gonna do this exam, right? Why not? I have 20. How hard this can be? Huh? And although the Marketing Cloud especially is no longer needed, and it sort of took me a year of procrastination, that I ended up getting 3 more certs just to avoid this one. When you're doing commerce-related implementation, marketing is going to be part of it, either transactional or promotional. So regardless of it, still part of the exam questions per se, but in my opinion, I think you should be well versed into how things talk to each other and which sort of points and how you want the data flowing across. So I empathize. It's a shame that it's not a prerequisite, but it's going to be part of the content regardless. So yeah, you should really get involved and have clarity around the architecture of Marketing Cloud.
Okay, Michael, any thoughts on this? Your comments?
I had the same. It was a tragedy in the beginning. So I started in the beginning of 2022, and I must admit I didn't have a lot of Commerce Cloud experience, and I just started with Partner Learning Camp. It was a bit already outdated, a bit shitty content, and I had that My King's book, and I just started learning, and to be honest, I learned the most from the prerequisites integration architect exam. That really that gave me a good vocabulary to talk to the architects and the different stakeholders you have so that was maybe the most valuable part of this journey. And then I redid all the content at the beginning of 2023. And I agree with the experience that Doug says. So what I did last year was, for the first time, I really started developing Apex code and integrations with Commerce Cloud. And that gave me, together with all the integration power-ups I got, that gave me a lot of confidence also to and maybe a perspective to finalize the content of the architect exam. So that was really useful, but it was so hard.
Yeah, actually, yeah, thanks for the link on the chat. And the new requirement is the data architect exam. So, which makes sense because I passed that one, and I think you really need to know data. I think every single project I've worked on, it's all about data. I mean, from GDPR to contact deletion, it's all about data. So it's good to know. I don't see many questions here, but I'll ask the questions for some people. So someone did ask me earlier, how much Commerce Cloud is in this exam? Maybe start with Doug again, your thoughts?
Yeah, so kind of like I mentioned, right? I mean, there's three core, let's say, buckets of questions. You're going to get questions around commerce, you're going to get questions around core, and you're going to get questions around marketing cloud. And I'd say commerce is probably around a third, right? I mean, there is a lot of questions there in commerce. So for me, I actually sat my B2C developer exam as well, and I definitely internally on a lot of the questions we had in Accenture around this exam, I also encouraged people to actually sit that exam intentionally, because even just having sat the exam, it gives you an idea about what's available. Having worked through adding, the connectors that Salesforce has and knowing what is available there allows you to at least get a good feeling for it, even if you haven't done that project work. So it is something that you should be well aware of. If you don't know anything about Commerce Cloud, it will be a challenge, right? It is something that you should be getting into and are trying to understand. So to be clear, B2C Commerce Cloud, the Demandware stack, not the D2C, B2C one and core, but the B2C stuff on Demandware stack.
Okay. Ines, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, quite similar. I mean, the exam, any exam, the first thing you should be grabbing is the exam guide. It basically tells you everything there. And for some reason to today, I still struggle to see people using this as a first resource. You have it very broken down very easily, and you should be checking your knowledge against that. And one of the things that it says is that you should have, there is an expectation that you should have 2 years of experience. And for me, it was mostly around other commerce platforms, but I think that's key. I have a real life experience, because you're going to have the inventory, you're going to have coupons, you're going to have lots of stuff that you're already making decisions of where is the data coming from, where does it live, where is it going, and where shouldn't be, right? So yeah, so that's one. It's not an easy exam, and you also have a trial mix and whatever. I think that gives you a good high level, but I would agree, if you've never seen Demandware, try to get hold of a way for you to see it. So there is a course, and I took the course from the academy just to get more involved with the product. The course in itself is not going to prepare you for the exam, but it's going to give you hands-on experience to how the things are sort of structured, where do you put the things. I'm very architectural. I need to see things to remember them, right? So yeah, I will definitely recommend doing something like that. I'm also fortunate to have good friends that working with the products, so I could think some questions and I could get shown stuff. And yeah, I think having visibility of Demandware definitely helps. Michael mentioned before the partner learning camp, and if you're a partner, you have access, you could give it a go, but I do not recommend this. I understand there may be a big makeover coming at some point in the catalog, but I feel I wasted a lot of time going through it. It's just too light, too high level, very repetitive. The UX is not good. So save yourself the pain. Don't do it, right? Just try to get yourself familiar with Demandware if you can, then have, I think, the architectural sort of pieces of commerce, regardless what's the app. Yeah, I think that will be my recommendations to start with, really.
Okay, and I hope, Michael, your thoughts about getting programmed.
So what I did in this year when I studied, I slowed down my study pace. So in 2022, I made myself do this in a month, and that was just too stressful. And this year for every, especially for the Commerce Cloud topics, I really went on a tangent and took a developer org that I can access, played around with the API, Okapi, and everything you learned on coupons, on whatever, I explored and tried to recreate and played with it. So indeed, outside of the normal learning, because this was where my knowledge was limited, and the reason why I went to study this was not because of the certification. This was more because I wanted to know, to understand the what the patterns are, and what you could do, what the possibilities are of the platform, so I can be of more use in this area, because we were able to integrate everything, but I had no idea if these were the best patterns and what the alternatives were. So this gave me a lot of perspective on those standard use cases they offer.
Okay, good point. So yeah, Ines, thanks for the memories. It was May of 2020 during the start of the pandemic when they started this whole program. And I remember that clearly because they had all these sessions, all these Everest charts, all these weeks, to 23 weeks to get to the top. I remember that clearly, and it was painful. So let's start with Ines. Let's change the order around the question. So let's talk about connectors. So in all those sessions back in May and even now, they always talk about three main systems: Service Cloud, Marketing Cloud, and Commerce Cloud. Those are the three that they normally give scenario questions on. How important are the connectors on those? No?
Spot on. That is the question, right? So remember that this exam, what it is, as its core of the exam, what they are checking is how you bring in the whole thing together. And you have three pieces that talks to each other. And what you need to bear in mind is how Salesforce recommends you to handle these things talking to each other. For example, the productized connectors. So MC Connect, right? That data that comes from MC, from Salesforce into MC, right? And also the non-productized kind of non-supporter connector that will go from Demandware over to Salesforce. And when you use it and how you sort of bring that idea of the business and technology together to align with the idea of the customer 360, that's like a theme going through the questions and stuff, and treating like individuals as humans rather than an ID, and what would it look like, right? Which sort of things you piece together in each one of the systems, and when you need to bring another thing to the table, for example, like when you need to do something custom and which options you have there and stuff. But yeah, connectors definitely is part of that. I think I did go through the book of Mike actually quite late, so it was my exam, but I would recommend it. I think he lays that out quite nicely anyway.
Good. And Michael, your thoughts on connector questions, connector scenarios?
I think we may have wasted our time with those connectors, because I think the CDP product that's now used, or any CDP, or the vision behind CDPs and storing large amounts of data and connecting multiple systems. The identity resolution is not just those three systems. So it's a good start, and if you have all three, well, good for you. We have some examples on how to do it, but that doesn't fit maybe more complex enterprise settings. And it's a good. I think it's a good start, but I think we need to expand this exam. And maybe Doug knows if that's already happened with more CDP type of patterns. Yeah.
Yeah, certainly. I haven't been involved in the last few months in anything like this, but I know that this is going to be the case, right? As CDP becomes a more core part of a lot of these things, it will be becoming part of this exam. So when and if that happens, I can't speak to, but certainly there's a fair expectation that will be something that slowly will be there. I think at the moment, I think that the limit of it might be a few questions around what is CDP and things like this, but that may be about it. I do think in general, I mean, the fundamentals of the connectors you should understand, right? So again, it's not about knowing everything. That's unrealistic, because I think very few people would ever be able to tell you back to back every part of every connector. I can tell you the core to Marketing Cloud one like the back of my hand, but I can't for the commerce to marketing. I don't know it that well, right? What's important is that you have the basics of that, and you have an understanding about what use cases are going to be supported and which cases you're going to have to build those custom scenarios for. Like, for example, we had discussions around things like using, Marketing Cloud Connect for journey entries, right? For triggering off messages, triggering an SMS or something. And, there's some cases there where I've seen people try and solution because they say, it's a connector, it does it real time. Yeah, it's not technically real time. And it's really important that you, when you're going through this exam, remember those things, that these small technicalities are things that if you've done those implementations, you should be relatively familiar with. But if you've just read the exam, done an exam somewhere, or just kind of read a guide, you might not have experienced it. And so it won't be quite as burnt in your brain. Oh, this doesn't work. Oh, this doesn't happen. So you've got to really be aware of those gotchas on the connectors so that you can then say, actually, this would need to be custom to support it.
Perfect. Okay, so speaking of resources, let's go back to this book by Mike King of Slalom. So let's be honest here, Ines, did you buy the book and did you read his book?
As I kind of mentioned, I did get the book, but it was a week to the exam, and don't recommend it. Please take more time to read these things. And yeah, the thing is, depends how comfortable are you with certain pieces. You could fly through most of the book. What I found the most interesting, it was certain connotations towards the end of how the three pieces sort of sit together. But I think it deserves more time. Please buy it in advance if you are to buy it. Also, I'll pop in the chat, I kind of wrote an article about the different bits I prepare myself for. There is a mirror board hanging about as well that I saw after the exam. It's in that article. Please have a look because it's very useful. Yeah.
Great. Michael, your thoughts on the book? Just quickly.
Yeah, so I agree with Ines. So read the parts that where you're not familiar with. And what I like is end of each chapter has some questions that you can practice. It's not exam questions, but it gives you, well, in some sense, the idea of if you grasp the content that you read. And I read the book 1.5 times.
Wow. Okay, excellent. And Doug, your thoughts on the book?
Well, I have two.
Do you pay for them, or are they free review copies?
I'm the technical reviewer of the first edition, so a bit of a self-plug there. So no, I have a couple that are sent out here, and actually, Michiel, I think we can also suggest one of our meetups for anyone who's interested in reading it, because I don't need to, unsurprisingly. No, I think it's a good book from Mike, and I mean, I was working with him a lot on this area because indeed, his background is more focused on the commerce area, and certainly mine was on marketing. So he felt it was a good match that we would work together on to make sure that a lot of the content's really well designed. I think certainly some of the questions that Michiel's mentioning, it gives you a good feeling to what to expect in the exam, because indeed some of the questions that Mike ended up putting in at the beginning were way too close to some real exam questions, and so we had to actually go back and make them a bit more different because they were really relevant to how you're trying to study for the exam. And so I think it gives you a good benchmark. Again, it's a book. At the end of the day, it's never going to cover everything, and I really would stress it's really hard, kind of like the guys are all saying, get your hands dirty. That's really the only way it's gonna sink in, because otherwise there's too many things to remember. So it's a good part to give you a good feeling, especially where you're a bit weaker in some areas and you go, yeah, I should really read a bit more about this topic or this topic. It's good to kind of force it through. And it's more in depth, I think, and more kind of recommendation than the generic kind of content you sometimes get from Salesforce, which is a bit high level. So I think that's good in that sense. But it's still a book. It's still information, and it's about you producing that before that's going to be really easy to remember.
I have a question for you guys. is the book sponsoring today's event?
No, it's not actually, but we could ask for some.
Mike, just give Mike a call and be like, hey.
We could have invited Mike. Can we give him a call? You have some.
The reason why I put this book up is because we in the past we would promote Greg's book, Greg Gortington, or that's his website. So Greg Gifford, but his website is called gortington.com. So we were promoting his book, and we kept reusing the same slide deck every month for these meetups. So like he had like a whole year and a half of his book being sponsored or being. Yeah, so we're responsible for his sales, but it's good to have a different book out there, and I recommend anybody. I mean, you've heard the responses on this.
I mean, but this can't have been a short book to write. I mean, and the same with anybody. Like, we're just promoting content that we see that's relevant to marketing in the hope that more people will want to write more books, that there'll be more books in this area because there was a state where there wasn't. Can I ask a question about one of the resources? So I'd love to get the panel's thoughts on the information about solution kits. So I got together a group of people and we tried to work through some of the content, and admittedly, we were very much looking at partner learning camp. So as stated by some of the participants, it was repetitive and some might say bloated in areas, and we covered some high level topics, but I think some of people's retrospective thoughts on that, and for those that went on to actually pass the exam, found the solution kits and focusing on those because it's the practical parts about how you piece the bits together, and Salesforce's recommended thoughts. But again, what were the panel's thoughts on those?
I think it's 10 or 12 use case scenarios. It's I call it the reference architecture, I believe. So you get a diagram, and you have some considerations and how to solve it. They are in part repetitive because some things need to be repeated. But I found them very useful because I think these are so the books give you a high level of point functionality in the different systems, and those PDFs, those reference architecture, give you the full picture of a variety of use cases. So they give you in the end a perspective. You can read them, let's say, in 2 hours. But you need time to let everything sink in. That's it, because it's very condensed. Yeah.
Any other thoughts, Doug? Your thoughts on?
I think they're good, right? They're often actually a reference point for a lot of the exam material, right? So in a lot of the questions, there's a lot of references towards how you should do it, and those do often reference the content that's available in the solution kits. But again, I really would stress it. Like, reading a solution kit is good. Setting it up yourself, connecting the things together will sink in. I think that is really a core thing, because if you're not, not everyone has access to all the instances and everything, so sometimes it's a bit more of a challenge. But it's really about the doing it that I think helps it sink in and make you remember when you're sitting in the exam. Maybe the question's a bit different than what was in the solution kit, but you can go, oh yeah, I remember you had to do this thing differently, and when I tried to set this up, it didn't work. Okay, it'll sink in a lot better in that sense. But the content's not bad. It's just sometimes a bit outdated, right? So especially as we change a lot of the features that are coming out with newer products, that does change over time. If you think about things like the OMS features, CDP as well, Interaction Studio. So all of these kind of things are really driving changes that mean that sometimes the solution kits might be a few months out of date versus newer features that have just been made available.
They kind of should let the community maybe maintain those. So put them on a GitHub and not stick to these scenarios.
Which the issues pile up with people complaining about why they're wrong.
I mean, I think there's value in Salesforce actually stating how they think it should be used, and then there being a separate one where the community illustrate how they are working with it in practice to bring those two closer together.
Free to pick up the content and work from it. That's a good idea. That's yeah.
I do think, I mean, just because you mentioned this one as well, Kerry, I think, you know, when you're going through the exam, it is important to remember these kind of questions are not, let's say, textbook answers from a marketing kind of catalog with sales about how everything is easy and perfect. These are real questions that real people have to deal with. And I think that's really, it does separate the difference between kind of the people that have just read the content and said, oh yeah, cool, on Trailhead it says this works like this, cool, done. It's not easy, right? The questions are driven by the real limitations of the product, and often that is something that is not as maybe displayed always in a lot of the content and the learning, right? That no one wants to promote things that are maybe limitations, but that is something to remember for people, that when they're going through the exam, in some exam answers, it's always like, you know, what should the ideal answer be? This is not that exam. This is, you need to know the real answers about how this will actually work.
And I think that's an important point to point out, because sometimes you can be in an exam and you can go, okay, well, this would be the ideal answer that everybody would want to, and this is the real answer. And then even though you know the real answer, you're like, but do they want me to?
Exactly.
Like,
I think
is the purpose of this
to remember.
Yeah, so it's a good point, as you said. Yeah.
Okay. Final thoughts, Ines, on
little I can say with the toolkits, because solution kits, because I didn't even know we had this wonderful page that I put in the chat. I came across some randoms like the buy online, pick up in store through some of the revision, but yeah, this has evolved a lot since last time I looked at it. So that's a good good news. And yeah, I mean, documentation, it will take time to get updated, but also the exam question is going to take a lot of time to get updated. So the thing that we talked about, the data platform, forget about it. I think it's going to take its time to land across, because content gets updated first, and the last thing are really the exams to get updated.
Okay. I know one question someone asked in the last call, which I remember, was how do you study for this exam if you don't have access to, say, Commerce Cloud, or you don't have access to Marketing Cloud? How hard would it be if you don't have access to those?
Very hard.
Yeah.
So if you are working in consulting partner or any sort of registered partner, you have the ability to get access to instances to get your hands around it. So don't be shy and ask, because those things don't exist like the developer orgs. If you don't have that, well, I'm sorry. The next thing that you can try to do is reach your circle of influence and see who is touching and working in the products. I was lucky to have a very, very good friend, actually, like one of the first persons I met in London 16 years ago, nothing to do with Salesforce at all. And she's working in a French retail company, and they use Demonware, so that was super useful. But I also enrolled myself into the course. Just the course, it doesn't prepare you for the exam, but it was great also to have Mike there and just go through the motions of how the Demonware behaves. So I'd recommend that.
Yeah, and if you're a freelancer, you can also try to become a partner, consulting partner. You can do that actually if you're on your own. And then that gives you, I think, if you qualify, you need, I think, to what is it, consultant level certifications, I believe. Then you qualify also for a Marketing Cloud instance. But the process is really, it's not that it's. I'm still working on, because I want to have that CDP test instance, and then you have you need that for that accreditation exam. But they also recommend that you have a Marketing Cloud instance you can connect it to. So preferably not a customer's account, a production account. So I need my own Marketing Cloud instance as well. But it's already taken me 2 or 3 months to try to get that. And it should work, but it's maybe next year I can tell you if this is a good path. Yeah.
Yeah, I concur. I end up giving in to be a registered partner. after many, many years around, and I don't recommend it unless it's the only way you're gonna get one of these instances. But don't do it for any other reasons if you are one person LTD like I am.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know people who actually bought Marketing Cloud, like 3 people, and they split it. Yeah, they split it 3 ways. And,
I don't even know what it costs.
it's about £1,000, maybe £1,000 a month. About depends on the contract length, but yeah, some people are just so desperate. I mean, you can take a course in Salesforce, and you get an org for 2 months, and then the CDP trial org is only 30 days. And only 30 days. So if you want to practice CDP, you can, but good luck. You know, you have to keep, asking for renewals all the time. So that's always a challenge, but not impossible, as we've seen. Because there were actually a few more people that actually passed this exam. They didn't want to come on or whatever, timing didn't work. But like I said, nothing's impossible. It's just a matter of dedication and really putting your mind to it.
But maybe
I do think
so. What Ines says, and also Doug, you need to have done the legwork. You have to have covered some miles in those platforms already. So if you don't have access or haven't have had access to those in the past, maybe it's not. It's not about having access just to an instance. It's having done some implementation work and understand already the platforms to a certain degree.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think as partners, within Accenture, we have easy enough. You can find an instance. I'm responsible for a few of them that we have as partner instances, right? So it's easy to get those accesses. If you're working for a larger client, which has a lot of these things, so you're working, with the Unilevers or this kind of thing of the world, they've got a lot of these instances as well available. Often somewhere available as a test instance because of the policies they have internally, and you're probably working with that if you're working there. So you're going to have access to those kind of systems. If you haven't had access to a system before, chances of you passing this exam are pretty low, right? So I think it's also setting the right expectation that this exam isn't really intended for people entering the market, which are doing it on the side. It really is something that your job is doing architecting for these kind of solutions already, right? And this is more just a capstone or kind of a way for you to also learn something about specific other areas, kind of like Michiel. For me, that was also a lot around B2C commerce, because that was the area that I'm the most weak in, right? So this is intended to be an extension of someone who's already largely doing this job. And therefore, you're probably largely already having access to these systems, or you have had access in the past. So in that case, it's less of a problem. It's a little bit like a painful thing to, I guess, hear, but sucks to be you if that's the case, not right. It's painful, but that's just how it is.
Yeah, and the ecosystem is so broad, right? So there are plenty of things to do that you probably have your heart and passion and experience and interest on. So yeah, I just feel like sometimes it feels like you need to complete all the pyramids and get all the budgets, and actually you don't.
You don't. No.
So what are the next steps now? Like, let's go back to this slide here. So when you think about it, this certification is quite heavy on the the right side of the actually both sides, because you need the data architect now. And the integration one, I mean, you're talking about somebody who has a lot of years of development, somebody who has who has an interest in integration architecture. So it sounds like they're moving towards the CTA candidates to do this exam, especially now that they don't have a need to do Marketing Cloud exam. I find it hard. Anybody's thoughts on these two? Like, the data architect is a hard exam, but the integration one requires a lot of knowledge of a lot of different systems. Any thoughts on that? Any thoughts on this requirement? No? Oops. Anybody here?
I feel like maybe we need to demystify some of the items. So again, there is 3 applications that you need to get your head around how they talk to each other. One is B2C. There are ways for you to get maybe familiar with it, and please at least have experience in commerce, I would recommend. And specifically what you want to work out is when to use realms, instances, how you split it on sites, if right? How customer lists, either single or cross-site or similar setup for catalogs, that's just commerce, right? Then you have your Salesforce. Is this, when you're looking at architecting things, it's like single, multi-org dilemma. So it's the same. What you're gonna do with Salesforce? How you're gonna segment? When you're gonna segment them? Right? Like tiny things like Doug was saying, that unless you have played with them or been challenged by them, like if you use the omni-channel inventory management, the realms and the orgs are one-to-one, and that's it. But unless you have been in this situation, it doesn't stick. And then the third part of the process is Marketing Cloud. And even that is not a prerequisite, you have to know how MC is playing with the rest of the toys, right? When you're gonna, and same with the splitting or not splitting, like when you're gonna use multiple business units and or different instances of Marketing Cloud. Very expensive, but it has its place to play. And you know, also remember that the business units are going to be very influenced with your decisions that you take across with your customer list and how you're going to design this. Right? So just to sort of bring it down to, there are specific things that you can learn to help you put this puzzle together.
Yeah, and I think Michael said it right. I mean, this exam came out in 2020, and now with CDP and Data Cloud in the mix, I can see this exam morphing and changing every year, right? A lot of the solutions that I had in mind 3 years ago is different now, right? Now today, obviously, I'm going to promote CDP or Data Cloud, but 3 years ago that didn't happen. So your approach is different, your connections are different, your whole system's different. So that's what I think. I don't know, Doug, maybe you have some more insight on that, but I think it's going to morph, this exam.
I'm certain things will come into change. I mean, as the guys have mentioned, you know, it's going to take time because these things don't get changed regularly. In some cases, you know, exams change once every 3, 4, or 5 years, right? There is regular reviews on these for questions that are no longer valid because of changes and releases, right? But at the end of the day, like the bigger changes, bringing in whole new clouds into questions, it doesn't really happen that frequently. And the reason is that it's obviously the idea is to give some stability to it, because all of the content, the materials, you know, the books people are buying, they don't talk about certain topics. So it's also a bit unfair to make sure that you have to update every single piece of content. And that's really hard for even Salesforce to keep up with, even though they are the marketing machine.
Yeah, we got like 5-7 minutes left. Anybody in the audience want to ask questions and speak up? We have time now if you want to do that. Anybody want to speak up here in the audience? Just no need to raise your hand, just ask questions. I mean, we have 3 people here who have passed the exam. If you want some advice, some guidelines, now's the time to do it. I don't see anybody here. Very quiet bunch as usual, as we noticed. Nobody has any questions. I think everyone.
I think maybe one other interesting thought. I mean, just going back to the pyramid you had there. We had a discussion internally with a couple of people, and I'm aware of, at least in the Salesforce ecosystem, one CTA who failed this exam.
Wow.
I think it's a good point to mention. Just because you do CTA is very much focused on core, right? Yeah. If you are a CTA, or if you think that because you've got the prerequisites for CTA, you'll be fine with this. No. I think that's one big assumption that I had. A few of the CTAs also within Accenture, there was comments around, oh yeah, but it should be fine for me, right? I'm like, I don't think you should make that assumption.
I think this is a really good point, and maybe it takes back to my initial statements on CTAs and solution architects. I think as a solution architect, because you cross domains and are on the path of understanding also the business case behind those domains, and can tie together those domains, you bring a lot more value than someone who just stays in the core platform. And I think CTAs, to be honest, that should be maybe on top of also the solution architect exams, not just platform. I think it's too narrow. yeah, sorry for everyone who paid $10,000 and had to fly to the US to be grilled by their fellow CTAs. But you can do this at home as well. Yeah.
But I mean, this is one of the reasons that I was pleased to see this exam or this extension. I mean, not that I have it or really am anywhere close to being able to say that I am an architect across these sort of domains, but I think it adds an acknowledgement for an entire skill set, which up until this point wasn't necessarily formally recognized. And it would have been if you knew people that did that, or if you were in an organization, but there was and there still is so much focus on the core platform. I mean, I love the fact that we've got like an architecture team and that there's architects.salesforce.com, but it doesn't cover anything that crosses the domain. We've got principles about being well architected, which are just overall principles, so you can apply them. But I look forward to seeing practical use cases where they're being applied across cloud, and that we're talking about those in more detail. Because I know we talk about things about being like, there is getting the certification, but I'm pleased to see all of these resources, because overall, you like, at least for myself, and I would assume many other people, you just want to be a good architect, right? You want to know what Salesforce is telling you about how to get the best from these products. And I suppose that's a question I have for the panel. We've talked about how there's a lot of change. And as people that are working in this space, who have experience, who have been able to benchmark their experience against this exam, how do you negotiate staying current across all of these areas when we've talked about the challenges that all the documentation lags behind?
Well, I feel like we could probably pick the beginning and the end of what you just said. So much goodness happened at the edges. This is where the fun is, where the nutrients exchange is. Like, look at your gardens, look at the, at the end of the edges of things. That's where the magic happens. So if I can encourage, please get part of the magic and broaden your horizons beyond just one app. Same with the teams. Look at the connections and the things that happens between across departments and teams. Like, at the edges is where life exists. And then, so I lost it. But it's basically a really, really interesting place to be. And yes, you want to be a good architect, but you need to look beyond just, when we talk about architecture by itself, it's not just how things talk to each other. It's not just about diagramming. It's not just about the humans involved. It's just so much more.
Yeah, no,
you all can relate probably to the beginning of your Salesforce careers, where you had your first admin exam. I thought, well, I got this. I know the platform now. And then every exam you did, there was like, oh fuck, I didn't know anything, and you become more aware that you don't know, and that feeling continues to grow as even with this exam. It's you know a lot, you know a little bit about a lot of things. That's the so it's a bit frightening. I'm not sure we can keep up, because now it goes faster and faster. So I don't know.
Yeah,
Just
sorry.
yeah.
And I remember. And we are not alone. That's the other magical thing, right? You have a bunch of people here. You have many other people around the ecosystem. We don't have to do the things by ourselves. Even though you are a solo admin, you are not alone, right? There is plenty of people helping just to get the value at the door. So just reach those people that can help you with the goal in mind.
Okay. So one last question around the horn before we close up. I'll ask everybody this, the three panelists. So the last question is, what's your desire to do the B2B architect exam, the one with CPQ, Cloud Craze, and Pardot, or whatever they call it now? That's the main focus on B2B. Doug, your thoughts? Are you going to do that exam?
I've been meaning to potentially look at it, but I've also been meaning to do CTA for a while. So I'm going to put it as it's a topic on my agenda, but for now I'm busy with my day-to-day.
Yeah, I I think we all are. Ines, your thoughts on the B2B exam?
Yeah, I empathize. I haven't even thought about it. I only sit in exams once I feel like, it's time to do it. So although I know a little bit of product praise, definitely part of it is my friend. Not this year.
Yeah, I know. Michael, your thoughts on that exam? Any thoughts of doing it?
Yeah, so maybe if my next client will be more in the B2B sphere, then I may consider, but only after working with the components. I won't do any work before that, I think. Yeah, so I come from the B2B lead generation market years ago. So I'm kind of tempted, but I'm like, well, it's enough. I spent so many time. I spend a month each year about in study, and there's frankly not a lot of exams anymore that are really interesting. Maybe except for the sales professional exam that came out today, which is an insult for everyone who really studied for the exams. Yeah.
Well, I know one.
Did you see it?
Yeah, I saw. I even know one recruiting company who brags that everyone who works there must pass the Salesforce associate exam. It's the very entry level Salesforce exam. So they say everyone is certified, which is true because they passed the associate exam.
Technically right, the best kind of right.
But I think in closing here, I think if anyone wants a challenge, and if you have access to a partner learning camp, there's plenty of accreditations to do on that system outside of Web Assessor, outside of Criterion. You have a whole set with Examify, and we have Data Cloud there now. If you want to attempt that one, you have MCP, Interaction Studio. You have Datorama, MCI there, and you even have loyalty on that one too. So if you want a good challenge, head over to the partner learning camp and try those exams, and they are tough, right? I mean, so they're not easy. And there's a whole bunch of other ones that are industry specific. All the digital engagement ones are there: Service Cloud Voice, Service Cloud Einstein, you name it, Health Cloud, Media Cloud, all there. But so I guess in closing, Carrie, you want to just close out the shop and say final thoughts?
Yeah, no. So I mean, I thank you everyone from the panel for sharing your thoughts. We hope that people on here, like who are able to join us tonight and who are watching the recording, have found that useful. We meet monthly with a combination of some online and some in person in London. I'll always put out for anyone that wants to talk, and also to our panelists. If you wanted to talk on any topic that you like, you're very welcome back at any time to share some content with our audience. But otherwise, we will see you soon.
Yeah, and thank you all three of you for making time tonight. I know it's late, it's 8 o'clock in Holland, so you're probably starving like I am. And again, thanks everyone for making time tonight, and we'll see you at the next edition.
Thanks very much, guys.
I'm seeing you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. I'm just gonna stop recording.